Hey everyone, my name is Alliestrasza. You guys probably know me primarily for my Hearthstone content on this channel, but I have been playing MTG Arena off and on since about last December, and I've really been enjoying Magic. So there is a new Magic rotation and expansion coming out called Throne of Eldraine, and I'm very excited for it. So I thought I would do my top 15 cards, what I think from Throne of Eldraine. So I hope you guys enjoy this card review. Okay, so to start us out, we've got Oko, Thief of Crowns. Traditionally, 3-mana planeswalkers have been very powerful, and I think that Oko is no exception. He has 2+ ability, means that he can increase his loyalty with great flexibility depending on what you need at the time. The +2 created food tokens can later become 3/3s with the +1 ability, or they can be swapped out with the -5 ability with an opposing creature that your opponent controls. Oko works really well with the new mana dork Gilded Goose, as you can curve him out on turn 2 and keep creating food supply for the goose. Something to keep in mind is that Oko turns the base power of the minions into 3/3s, meaning that this works extremely well with +1/+1 counters. So in the event that you had an amassed zombie, it would actually be a 4/4 or potentially larger if you have more +1/+1 counters on it. All right, so let's talk about Questing Beast. Questing Beast seems insane. For 4 mana, Vigilance, Death Touch, and Haste, it's green. Can't be blocked by creatures with 2 power or less. Combat damage from your other creatures can't be prevented. And it also deals combat damage to not only to the opponent, but also to a planeswalker that they control. So basically, Questing Beast is insane, in my opinion. If Field of the Deck stay popular in the upcoming meta, which they probably will, Questing Beast can sneak past the zombies and even do so the turn that he does enter play. It eliminates the need to redirect the Questing Adventurer at walkers due to that final ability, which is amazing in a planeswalker-centric meta where it seems like a lot of decks seem to try to stave off damage on their face by redirecting it towards their planeswalkers. The Haste makes him great versus Teferi, and the Death Touch makes it possible for it to kill creatures like Golos that would normally be able to block him. So overall, with everything that this card offers, I think Questing Beast is going to see a lot of play. Moving on to Once Upon a Time. I would say that generally if you can play a card for free, it can be pretty powerful. Now obviously that depends on what you're getting, but in the case of Once Upon a Time, we have seen similar forms of this card in recent Standard, some examples being Adventuring Impulse and Commune with Dinosaurs. On top of this card being free sometimes, it is also an instant. So that probably makes up for the fact that it's a little bit more expensive than some of the counterparts that I mentioned. So anything that allows you to tutor for something that you need, sift through your deck, is generally pretty powerful. So I expect this card to be powerful in Standard and probably other formats as well. Emory, Lurker of the Loch. I love this art, by the way. I don't know about you guys. But this is a card that I'm not sure if it will be amazing right away in Standard, but it seems to have all of the necessary abilities to be a really good card. It works really well with Kethis, and that it is both a legendary and it fills your graveyard. With rotation, we are losing a lot of mana fixing for the 4-color Legends deck. So it might take a little bit of time for this card to shine, but I don't see why it wouldn't be really good in the future. Artifact decks haven't really shined in Standard rotation for a little while, but with this card, it might be a good time to revisit the idea of artifact decks. Wildborn Preserver. So this is a 2-mana 2/2, a green 2-mana 2/2, but it's much more than just a 2/2. With the reach and flash abilities, it would probably be a good inclusion into faster creature type decks, but when you add the ability of being able to pump this with basically almost any creature entering the battlefield, this little guy is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Unfortunately, Teferi does kind of limit the flash upside of the Wildborn Preserver, but if you combine the Preserver with the new Questing Beast, it might make for a formidable green creature package in the new upcoming Standard. This also fits really well into Simic Flash, so there is already an existing shell of a deck that this could fit really well into, so I do think that this little guy will see play. Moving on to Murderous Rider. It's one of the new adventure spells for Black this expansion, and I do think it's one of the strongest adventure cards. It's a removal spell, it's a kill spell, and it's also an added lifelink creature. So there's this really nice dichotomy between losing the life for that kill spell and also having the ability to gain yourself back up in life with the 2/3 creature. So against aggro decks where you're kind of scared to use this spell, you can just cast the 2/3 to try to get yourself back into the game. The fact that Murderous Rider can kill planeswalkers for 3 mana is what I think makes this card really strong, because War of the Spark made a very heavy planeswalker meta, and Murderous Rider is going to fit in really well. Wishclaw Talisman. So this artifact is actually a pretty cool card. It is a 3 mana tutor, which is pretty powerful in standard, but it does have a pretty significant downside in that your opponent gets to tutor for a card as well. You get to do it twice and they get to do it once. So I do think that the power level of this card will probably come from how decks are able to mitigate the downside. So one of the ways to limit the downside is to use Teferi, Time Reveler, to bounce the artifact back to your hand after you remove your first wish counter, so they don't get the chance to tutor through their deck either. You could also play Soul Diviner the turn before, the 2 mana 2/3 that allows you to remove counters from an artifact. So you can play that the turn before and get the wish counters down to 1 before you activate the ability. This gets even easier with Manifold Key, as you can activate it in response to your first activation to get 2 tutors at once. Overall, it's a very powerful card, and I expect it to find its shell at some point over the course of the 2 years that it will be in standard play, if not right away. All right, next we have the Royal Saiyans. These people look cool. Love the artwork. So the Royal Saiyans at first don't look as powerful as Oko, but again, they are a 3 mana planeswalker, and traditionally 3 mana planeswalkers are pretty powerful, as we said earlier. So I think that the Royal Saiyans could probably fit into something like the Arclight Phoenix deck. They could capitalize on some of the abilities, or the Phoenix could capitalize on the abilities right away, whether it is to buff it as soon as it comes into play, or to cycle to get the Phoenix into the graveyard. So I think we might see the Royal Saiyans in that kind of deck. Burrow Elder. This is a very strong mana dork. It has Vigilance, meaning that you can attack with it in the same turn that you can tap it for mana. It scales in power and toughness with your colors, and it's a card that can add a lot of mana to a 3-color or more deck. Even on its own, it taps for 2 mana, meaning you can ramp to 6 mana on turn 4 just with this card alone. And right now there's incredibly powerful 6-drops in standard, whether it be like Liliana or an Ugin, and there's even the new really powerful 6-drop that is Garak, Cursed Huntsman. I'd also like to point out with the card Gauntlets of Light and 4 different colored permanents that this card has the potential to produce infinite mana, which is generally a pretty strong thing, and you can do a lot of crazy stuff with infinite mana. Moving on to Acclaimed Contender. So it looks like Knights is going to be a pretty viable archetype in Throne of Eldraine, and Acclaimed Contender is definitely a reason to make sure that you have white in your Knight archetype. It's already decently statted at 3 mana for a 3/3, but in addition to that, you also get to draw a card. And not just any card, you get to pick between either a knight, an aura, an equipment, or a legendary artifact. That's so many choices, so you should very consistently be able to hit with this card and find what's relevant to you at the time. So this is the type of card that a tribal deck needs to not run out of steam. Bonecrusher Giants. So it is one of the new red adventure cards. So with this card, if the creature wasn't strong, I'm not so sure how great this card would be, but the fact that we get a good creature on top of just a 2 mana shock, I think makes this card fairly powerful. It's worth noting that with all the protection in standard right now, this card might be the only way for mono red to deal with Cerulean Drake. So you can't stomp the Drake directly, but you can stomp something else during combat while Cerulean Drake is blocking a red creature of yours. The body is nice, and it might be the go-to choice instead of the Adventure First, and the stats are pretty nice, and it also threatens to shock the opponent for trying to remove it. Next we have Garak, Cursed Huntsman. So oftentimes 6 mana walkers can be a little too slow, but Garak does have some promising abilities that we can probably work with. The most notable ability is his ultimate, which comes into play with only one less than it actually needs to get there, so it shouldn't be too difficult to get to his -6 ability. You could ultimate Garak the turn that he comes into play with any proliferate effect, or you could do it in all one card with Command the Dreadhorde by targeting Garak and also getting Pollen Bright Druid for an instant emblem. Whether you play Garak for his ultimate or just as a value generator, we might be able to see him make a splash on Constructed if he can compete with the Lyanna for that 6-drop slot. Alright, Wicked Wolf is a green 4-mana 3/3 and happens to work really well with the new Planeswalker Oko, Thief of Crowns, and can work well as a form of removal, similar in the way that Ravenous Chupacabra works for black. It's also just a sticky threat against control decks, as having just one food token can help it survive a Wrath or another board wipe. Brazen Borrower, the blue adventure card. So both sides of this card are pretty powerful. On the creature side, you have the 3-mana 3/1 Flash Flyer, which is already pretty strong as it is, but this card comes built in with something to spend your mana on your second turn. It's really the flexibility of this card that makes it so powerful. You can choose to just bounce something when you need to, or you can choose to get the creature down when the mana is tight. And when mana isn't tight, you can cast both. And because both of them are at instant speed, it's even flexible around when you can cast it. The biggest downside to this card is that it can't block ground creatures, but that's a small price to pay for everything else that this card provides. I think this deck could easily fit into a control shell or a Simic Flash deck. Lastly, we have Robber of the Rich. Robber of the Rich should see play in most aggressive red decks. Not only is it a haste minion with 2 power, but it also has the ability to generate card advantage for you as well. Most aggressive red decks often wind up getting their hand size lower than their opponents, so it is likely that the ability will proc more often than not. Attacking with a rogue may be the more restrictive part of the card text, but I don't think it'll be worth it to add more rogues to your aggressive red decks in order for a higher chance to get the value part of the ability off. I think probably just the 4 robbers in an aggressive red deck will be enough to make it worth it to get value sometimes, and also just to be a good 2-mana aggressive red card. Alright, there you have it, folks. That is my list of 15 cards that I think are going to be powerful in Standard. There are a lot of powerful cards coming out in Throne of Eldraine, and for the sake of keeping the list a reasonable length, I definitely had to omit some other powerful cards. So I picked the cards that I thought will definitely see a lot of play, and cards that I had a good time thinking about the implications of how they would affect Standard play. So if I did miss anything really important or obvious, you should definitely let me know in the comments and let me know what you think. Maybe tell me your favorite card that you're excited for in Throne of Eldraine. I am still fairly new to Magic. I'm having an amazing time learning about the game, and I can't wait to play some constructed decks in Standard. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you so much. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. If you'd like to see more content from me, you can check out some of my stream highlights from Twitch over here. And if you'd like to get to know me a little bit more, maybe outside of gaming, you can check out my vlogs over here. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, and thank you again for watching this video. Bye guys!